Okay, so today we're going to ask the question about how hard can it be to count up to 49? Of course, I'm referring to the Torah commandment of counting the Omer. I should say that right now no one is with me on this, though a lot of people have been watching the video, so I'm going to definitely go forward with this. Okay, counting the Omer. First of all, what is the Omer? The Omer is literally a measurement. It's a sheaf of wheat or barley. It's and that was the offering. So there's the Omer offering that comes after Passover. So what we do is the night after the Seder for Passover, what is really the first night of Passover, we begin counting. Or actually, it's the second day of Passover. It's the 16th of Nisan and Shavuot. Why do we do this? Well, first of all, the Bible tells us, Leviticus 23, 9 to 21, and also Deuteronomy 16, 9 to 12. So those are the biblical verses that tell us to do this. What's interesting to note, hi Tehila, it's great to see you. What's interesting to note is that we begin counting, as I said, the second day of Passover, the night after the Leil Seder, and that's when the people go out and harvest barley, and they prepare it, and the second day of Passover they bring an offering, and then we count 49 days. So that first night, the second night of Passover, we count one day of the Omer, and we count 49 days, or 7 complete weeks. And at the end, the 50th day is Shavuot, the literally meaning weeks. It's 7 complete weeks, which is not an arbitrary number. It has deep meaning. So we start counting on the second day of Passover, on the 16th of Nisan, 49 days. We count at night because the day actually begins at night. And then when we finish completing 49 days, the 50th day is the holiday of Shavuot. So after Passover, Jews would bring the first sheaves to the temple, thanking Hashem for the harvest. And that's why the offering is called an Omer. Okay. What's interesting is, as I said, we count 50 days, and at the end of 50 days, or at the end of 49 days, the 50th day is Shavuot. Shavuot is the only major holiday that is not given a date in the Torah. Shavuot is celebrated after we finish counting, not on any specific date, though of course it's the same date every year, because as I said, we start counting on the 16th of Nisan, and then on the 6th of Sivan is always 50 days later. That is Shavuot. But the Torah itself does not mention a specific date for Shavuot. It's dependent on the counting. Okay. The Omer is a measure of unthreshed stalks of grain, and it's the amount of grain used for the temple offering. I'd like to tell you how it's done, because it's actually very simple. After the sun goes down, when it's definitely night, we say a blessing, we say a bracha, Baruch atah Hashem, Elokeinu melech olam asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu al sfirat ha'omer. Blessed are you, King of the universe, who has sanctified us with his commandments and commanded us to count the Omer. That's it, one line. And then you count. the first night, the second night of Passover, you say, today is one day of the Omer. Hayom Yom Achad LaOmer. And you keep counting. This is the second day of the Omer, or 2 days of the Omer, 3 days of the Omer. When you get to 8, when you get to the seventh day, you say, this is 1 week. This is 7 days, which is 1 week of the Omer. 8 days is this is 8 days, which is 1 week, and 1 day of the Omer. So all you have to do is literally count exactly like the Torah says. Now, as I said, there's a blessing with that, but the mitzvah is to count 49 complete days, 7 complete weeks. So if you miss one, well, you're not doing the mitzvah. You can no longer count 7 complete weeks. So what happens is, let's say you miss a night. Okay, the next night, you can count, but you count without the blessing. Okay. If you miss and you remember the next day before nightfall, you can count and then you can begin again with the blessing at night. But if you miss a complete day and then the next day, you can no longer say with the blessing. Okay. Also, since we're required to count, you can't say what day it will be if you haven't counted it yet. Meaning it's coming up on sundown. I haven't counted yet. Someone asks me, what night? What are you counting tonight? I can't say it because that's almost like counting. So what do? You say, I counted this number last night. So in that way, you avoid that okay. So Tehillah said she's at work and she can't speak. God bless you. It's learning Torah, no matter what. It's really a very high level. Okay. So you should say, if you're asked what are we counting tonight, you should say, well, last night I counted this. Okay. Now, what is the connection between Passover and Shavuot? Why is Shavuot dependent on the counting that begins on Passover? Passover is when we left Egypt. But we didn't leave Egypt. God didn't set us free to go do whatever we wanted. God set us free with a specific purpose in mind, the purpose of coming into Israel, which was the covenant. So there is an inherent connection between Passover and Shavuot. And we recognize this by counting the Omer, counting the days between Passover and Shavuot. Shavuot is actually, it's a higher level of liberation. Leaving Egypt was not complete liberation. Entering Israel was. There's a tradition that the Jews knew in advance that they would receive the Torah on the 50th day after leaving Egypt, which was Shavuot. But they did not do Shavuot yet because they weren't in the land, so they couldn't harvest. So when we get to Shavuot, we'll talk about that connection. Another thing that Jews do on Shavuot is, Shavuot, as I said, is 7 weeks. And 7 is a complete cycle. But people take this opportunity. In Kabbalah, they talk about the Sheva Sfirot. In Kabbalah, they talk about the 7 emanations, the lower emanations. And they're Chesed, Gvura, Tiferet, Netzach, Hod, Yisod, and Malchut. I can't do that by memory. It's very impressive. But what they are is Chesed is loving kindness. Gvura means Chesed is expansive, loving kindness. Gvura is contraction and I don't know if you would call it not exactly bravery, but justice. Tiferet is balance. Netzach is literally means eternity or winning. Hod means glory. Yesod means the basis, and Malchut is kingship. So what there's a Kabbalistic practice to assign one of these sfirot to every week. So there will be an entire week of Chesed, an entire week of Gvura, an entire week of Tiferet, entire week of Netzach, and then what you do is every day within that you assign another one of the 7 emanations, so that we will have 49 different pairings. Allow me to explain. So the first week is the week of Chesed. So the first night that you count the Omer, the number 1 night is Chesed Shebechesed, loving kindness of loving kindness. The second night will be Gvura Shebechesed, the justice of loving kindness. The third night will be Tiferet Shebechesed, the balance that's in Chesed. This goes on until you finish 7 emanations of Chesed. And then in the second week, you do Gvura. So you have Gvura. So you have Chesed Shebegvura is the first night, which is not the same as Gvura Shebechesed. The second night is Gvura Shebegvura. Third night is Tiferet Shebegvura, and so on. And then you get to the third week is Tiferet. And the first night of the third week would be Chesed Shebetiferet. Second night would be Gvura Shebetiferet. And there are people who have worked out meditations for each of these emanations, that you can work on aspects of your life that are represented by these pairings, by these unique pairings of the emanations. It's actually a very deep, personal work. Let me see if I can find an example of this. Right. Okay, Chesed is loving kindness, Gvura is justice and discipline, Tiferet is harmony and compassion, Netzach is endurance. I said eternity. Hod is humility, Yesod is bonding, Malchut is sovereignty and leadership. They're all represented by people in the Torah. Chesed is Abraham, Gvura is Isaac, Tiferet is Jacob, Netzach is Moshe, Hod, which is humility, is Aaron, Yesod, which is bonding, is Yosef, and Malchut is, of course, David. Okay, we said that there are unique combinations. Let me see if okay. So for example, yeah, a lot of people talk about, okay, Chesed of Chesed is the first day. It's the loving kindness in loving kindness. The Aish.com website explains that that love is important. It's a necessary component. It's both giving and receiving. So you meditate for that entire day on the loving kindness that is in loving kindness. The second day, which is Gvura of Chesed, the as we said, the discipline, the discipline that is within loving kindness. Aish.com says this is when that healthy love must always include discipline, must always include boundaries. And these are very, I think they're, even I'm not a very spiritual person, but I think that the meditations are incredibly useful, and it gives you a chance to really do some very deep fixing in your life to be meditative about different and important aspects of your life. And that's another point that has come out of counting the Omer, is these aspects of the Sfirot, of the emanations, or they're also called permutations. Um, and yeah, and if you do a different meditation of these different permutations of the 7 aspects of your soul, and you do that for 49 days, it's an incredibly powerful experience. My wife does it. I wish I did it. Okay. Um, there's also a tradition that at the end of the Omer, at the end of 49 days, which is the 6th day of Sivan, which is Shavuot, there's a tradition that is when the Torah was given at Mount Sinai. We'll talk about that when Shavuot comes around. What's interesting to note is that at the end of the 49 days, there's the barley harvest on the 2nd day of Passover at night, um, and they start preparing the 2 leavened breads of the Omer offering, which is the only time that leavened bread ever is brought into the temple. The showbreads and wave offerings are all unleavened, but the 2 breads are actually sourdough. It's the barley that's been left to ferment for 49 days, which is a sufficient time for regular dough to become sourdough. So we have the connection between Passover and Shavuot. They're actually one long period of time connected by the counting of 49 days. As I said, there's no specific date counted for Shavuot. So Passover is physical freedom, and Shavuot is spiritual freedom, and it's our national freedom. Okay. In Israel, that's also the time, the Omer period, which is the final ripening period of wheat and barley and grains before it's harvested around Shavuot. There's also an interesting thing. The reason why I look so grizzled and why a lot of Jews are looking very unkempt is because it's a period, the Omer period is a period of semi-mourning. And what we don't do is we don't shave, we won't have weddings, we won't play music, we don't have haircuts, no parties. And this is semi-mourning, like low key. And the reason is, the reason that's given is that the Omer period was when Rabbi Akiva's 24,000 students, this is a story that's told in the Talmud, died in a plague. And why did they die? Rabbi Akiva's students died because they did not honor each other. Unfortunately, there is a tendency, it's really funny. Okay, there's a tendency in religion. Religion can make people very zealous. They turn it into zealots. And they're so sure of the justice and piety of their cause that they will be not nice to other people. And it is for this reason that Rabbi Akiva's students, 24,000 students, died in a plague because they weren't nice to each other. They were holy, they were righteous, they were pious, but they were not nice to each other. And piety can lead to not being nice. Torah should increase love between people. It shouldn't decrease love between people. So that's why it was a tragedy. So we're semi-mourning. There are other horrible things that happened during this period, but the reason given in the Talmud is Rabbi Akiva's students. So we're semi-mourning. We don't shave. I don't trim my beard. We don't do our nails. We don't listen to music or go to weddings. And that generally goes until Motzei Shabbos. Motzei Shabbos is a kind of a holiday for Jews. It's what we call Lag BaOmer. Lag is in Gematria the Hebrew number 33. It is the 33rd day of the Omer. Okay, and what happened on the 33rd day of the Omer? That's when the plague finished. That's when the students of Rabbi Akiva stopped dying. So that's why we stop mourning and we kind of celebrate. But there is another tradition. We have a Kabbalistic tradition that this is the celebration for the death and the birth of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, also known as the Rashbi. And the Rashbi, he's buried in Har Meron, not so far from where I live. And he was credited with writing down the Zohar, the basic work that is used to study Kabbalah or esoteric learning. I should note that Kabbalah is not what people think it is. It's a different form of learning. A lot of it is based in the Talmud, and of course, all of that comes from verses in the Torah. The Rashbi, Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, who's buried in Meron, he was one of Rabbi Akiva's 5 students. And despite horrible persecutions, he continued to study Torah and to despite Roman persecution. There's an amazing story told in the Talmud, which is, my Rav pointed out to me, it's the story about the Rashbi is told in the Talmud in the section in the folio that's called Shabbat. It's mostly about Shabbat, and it's on page 33, which, as we said, Lag BaOmer was when Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai the Rashbi was born, and also when he passed away. So what happened? So the Romans outlawed the study of Torah. They, by the pain of death, anyone who taught Torah or learned Torah was sentenced to death if he was caught. And Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai came out with a public statement against this, and the Romans announced the death sentence on him, and they started looking for him, and he went into hiding. What's interesting is there's a section of the Talmud, I'm just remembering it, so if I misquote it, please correct me. A bunch of rabbis were sitting around talking about the Romans. And one of the rabbis said, hey, the Romans are great people. They build bridges, build roads, they mint coins, they build bathhouses, they do all these wonderful things. And Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai said, no, everything they do for themselves. They build roads just so they can collect taxes, and that's all they do. And so they shouldn't be praised. And then he came out with the public statement that people should continue to learn Torah. So he was not loved by the Romans. He was forced to go into hiding. Okay, that's also told on page 33 of the treatise of the folio of Shabbat. So what the Rashbi, Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, was forced to go into hiding with his son Elazar. They hid in a cave in the Shomron, in the north of Israel. And they were in a cave. They had no food, no water. But what happened? A stream of water suddenly appeared, and a carob tree, which usually takes a very long time to grow, sprouted next to their cave, and they were able to eat the carobs and survive. And they would sit around buried up to their neck in sand so their clothes would not wear out. And they studied Torah day and night. So that's what they were doing, studying day and night, and praying and speaking to Hashem. And they did that for 12 years. That's all they did. So one day, Elijah the prophet came to the cave and he said, Caesar's dead. The Roman king has died. And there's no more decree against the Rashbi, against Rabbi Shimon. You can come out of the cave. That was Elijah the prophet. Mystical Elijah the prophet. He was not alive at the time. So they left the cave and they went out and they saw some farmers working in the field. And Rabbi Shimon was like, what are these people doing? They should be studying Torah day and night, nonstop, like we did. How could they work? And he looked at them and they were immediately vaporized because he was on such a high, powerful spiritual level. And a voice came out from heaven and said, wait a second, you can't destroy my world. This is my world. Go back to your cave. So Rabbi Shimon and his son went back to the cave. And at the end of a year, a voice came out from heaven and said, you can leave now. So they left. And what happened? They saw people doing these worldly things, but they held themselves back. And then they saw a man. It was Friday afternoon. It was getting to be Shabbos. And they saw a man with two bundles of myrtle blossoms, which are very aromatic. And Rabbi Shimon asked him, where are you going? And he said, they're in honor of Shabbat. And so he said, why two? And he said, well, one is for Zachor and the other is for Shamor. One is for remembering the Sabbath and the others for protecting the Shabbats, which are the two versions of the commandment for keeping Shabbos as according to the two versions of the 10 commandments that are it's repeated in the Torah. So Rabbi Shimon said, Jews are amazing. They keep the Shabbos even when they're doing their physical things. They have in mind serving Hashem. So that's the story of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. So what we do is on Lag BaOmer, the celebration of his birth and his death, which is going to be on Shabbat night as Shabbat goes out. All Israel is going to celebrate Lag BaOmer, and the way we usually celebrate it is with huge bonfires, lots of singing and dancing and celebrating. And usually the focus of that is Mount Meron, which is near Tzfad. And that's where Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai is buried. There's a huge shrine where he was buried. And we sing and dance all night. And usually there's a gathering, 30, 40, 50, 60,000 people come to celebrate Lag BaOmer. Another tradition is we have what's called the Halakha, which is, it's so sweet. It's so sweet. A Halakha is there is a tradition not to give little boys haircuts until their third birthday. That's like a tree which you cannot harvest its fruit for 3 years. And on the third year, you can give them a haircut, and that's why you'll often see young Jewish boys with very long hair and tied back in a ponytail, and that's when they can start speaking Torah. And it's there's a very sweet ceremony where you cut your boy's hair and you give the honor of cutting off a lock of his hair to a relative or to a rabbi, a Torah scholar. It's an honor, and it's a beautiful, beautiful um, tradition. It's something that's done on Lag BaOmer frequently, and frequently at Meron. Unfortunately, this year, because of the security situation, because Israel happens to be at war, there will not be a Lag BaOmer celebration at Meron. Though Lag BaOmer will be observed around the country, there may be security announcements saying no bonfires. I've seen scary large bonfires in Lag BaOmer. It's a problem. There have been brush fires, things caught fire, buildings burned down. It's not a great thing. It's kind of scary. And of course, when was the Lag BaOmer? In 2021, on Lag BaOmer, there was a huge gathering, and there was a problem with a crowd crush. meaning people were trying to get out. The place was set up wrong. Fences fell down, and and uh, 100 and how many people died? Let me see. Um, yeah, there were almost 100,000 people there. 45 men and boys were killed, and 150 were injured. So it's estimated there were 100,000 people there. So the authorities tend to be very cautious about these gatherings now. So this Saturday night is Lag BaOmer, the 33rd night of the Omer counting, and that's how it's usually observed. It's joyous, but it can be a bit problematic. Um, and yeah, and it's also interesting that um, that at the end of the counting of the Omer is Shavuot, and it's what the Christians refer to as Pentecost. The Pentecost was Shavuot, the festival of the weeks. So there is that connection. I don't know enough to say, I don't know enough about the Christian holiday. I certainly don't know enough about how it interconnects with the Jewish holiday. But that's the Omer. That's the Lag BaOmer, which is this week. Oddly enough, there's no traditional food that I can think of. Um, that's kind of strange, but it's certainly nice to have a uh, a bonfire in your backyard and singing and dancing and gathering and learning Torah. Um, yeah. So I used to. Oh gosh. Okay. So there's not much more to say about Lag BaOmer. So I'll tell you a personal story about Lag BaOmer. I it used to be very important for me to go to Miron every year for Lag BaOmer. And I used to go because a lot of my friends went, and there's the shrine where all the Orthodox and ultra Orthodox Jews go, and they're singing and dancing all night. And actually, I had two experiences there. Um, and then there's a forest next to that where all the hippies hang out. And guess where I used to hang out? So one year, I had ordered a new pair of tefillin, which were very important to me. Um, the tefillin I had gotten when I was a young boy for my bar mitzvah, they were not kosher. Um, I had them checked, and the person who checked them said no. So I had to get a new pair of tefillin, and they were kind of expensive. But I had the money, but they were kind of expensive. So I approached my father of blessed memory, and I said, "Dad, I need to buy a new set of tefillin." He said, "Okay." And I said, "This is how much they cost." He said, "Okay, I'll talk to your mom. We'll send you the money." I said, "No, no, no, no." I said, "This is between a father and his son. I want it to be between the two of us. I want you to give me my tefillin like an Abba, and that you want me to put on tefillin." He said, "Okay, I understand." And he sent me the money. And I had a friend order them from a very special scribed tefillin are not simple. They have to be written with great intention. So I had them written. And my friend was in Jerusalem. I couldn't get to him. He couldn't get to me. So he finally had them. And when can we get together? The only time we could get together was on Lag BaOmer. He was going to the Rashbi. I was going to the Rashbi. And so we met up at the Rashbi, and they're singing and dancing all night long. So we met like 9 o'clock at night, And he gave me the tefillin. I was very happy, and I had my new tefillin. I can't put them on until the morning, until dawn. So he gives me the tefillin. I'm holding on to them all night. And as dawn approaches, I'm all excited. I'm going to put them on. I take them out of the bag, and I hear someone call my name. But he calls me Adam, which is my English name, and it's also the name that I was called officially by the Army. So I turn around, and it's my friend Freddie, who I knew from the Army, from reserve duty. And Freddie is a cop. He's a policeman, and he was working at Meron for Lag BaOmer. And he looked at me and said, "No, Adam, oh, that's so nice." And Freddie was not religious at all. And he said, "Oh, I see you have tefillin. I haven't put on tefillin since my bar mitzvah." And he looked at me and said, "Oh, can I put on your tefillin?" And I was thinking, this is the first time I get to put them on. And then I realized, no, it's even better that Freddie is the first one to put on my tefillin. And he did. So my brand new tefillin, Freddie put on for the first time at Meron on Lag BaOmer. So that's how I remember Lag BaOmer. Yeah, for my tefillin. And another time I was in the Army doing reserve duty way down south in the Negev. And I told my officer, I was doing my 3.5 weeks, and I said, Lag BaOmer, I have to be by the Rashbi, in Meron for Lag BaOmer. And he said, we'll see. I said, no, I have to. I said, okay. So what happened was I did a patrol during the day, and late afternoon, I literally got off the Jeep on the highway, way down south in the Negev, and I started hitchhiking. All I had was I was in uniform, I had that blanket, I had my prayer book and my tefillin and my rifle. That was it. And I started hitchhiking. I ended up writing a novella, a long-ish short story, not so short story, about I took these rides just like crazy, crazy. Like two guys who were speaking Arabic. I was in the back of the car. I was sure I was going to die. They stopped in an Arab town, and they were two Sephardi Jews, and their sister had married an Arab, and they spoke Arabic, and crazy stories. And this hippie guy who I couldn't understand a word he was saying. Actually, on the way back, I got a ride with Vendel Jones, if you know who that is. It was really a crazy, crazy trip. So that's and I got off in the afternoon before Tisha B'Av. I managed to get hitchhike rides all the way up, made it up there by nighttime, stayed up all night dancing and singing and everything and praying, and the next morning hitchhiked out and made it back and got back on the Jeep on the highway. I didn't even make it back to the base. I had to get on the Jeep. They needed someone on the Jeep. So I literally stayed up for 2.5 days straight. It was insane. It wasn't very safe because I was falling asleep on the machine gun in the back of the Jeep. But that was my Lag BaOmer. I was so dedicated to going to the Rashbi for Lag BaOmer. So Lag BaOmer is not only, I mean, it's probably the most Kabbalistic of all the holidays on the Jewish calendar. And like I said, the Omer is simply counting 49 days. And you have these deep meditations on what each day means. So on one hand, you say to yourself, how hard can it be to count 49 days? And it's explicitly what the Torah says. Count 49 days. On the 50th day, you have Shavuot. You have the festival of Shavuot. How hard can it be to count 49 days? And I'm here to tell you, It's not so easy. There are very few times that I've actually managed to make it through all 49, all 50 days, 49 days, without missing a day. There are very handy apps that you can have on your cell phone, which remind you every evening to count the Omer. But I think it's just a matter of it's a commentary on life, that life is like always happening. And even though you try to set a routine, there aren't too many people who can set that strong a routine every single night. And I think that's also an aspect of learning to serve Hashem in a steady, dedicated manner. I think that's a big learning from that as well. I guess that's all there is to say about the counting of the Omer and Lag BaOmer. As I said, it's happening on Motzei Shabbos on when Shabbat goes out. Should be a lot of fun. Uh, Let me know how it goes for you, and let me know if you have any more questions about this. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Tehila. It really was important that you joined me. Be blessed, y'all, and keep in touch.